In the last video, we looked at Lady Philosophy's theory or account of true happiness. Remember, it consisted of 4 claims that she made about true happiness. In this video, what we're going to discuss is Lady Philosophy's account of and evaluation of the main ways or common paths through which people attempt to achieve happiness. And we'll see eventually that she takes none of these paths to lead to true happiness. So, tried to come up with a little representation to capture what's going on in her discussion. So, at the top, as the ultimate aim of all that we do, we have happiness. And here, at this level, we have a statement of the common paths through which people attempt to obtain happiness. And here we have examples of the kinds of lives associated with each path. So let's look at the common paths through which people attempt to attain happiness. Lady Philosophy suggests that there are 5. Wealth, position or status, power, fame or glory, and pleasure. Let's talk now about the kinds of lives associated with each path. So, the life of wealth. That's a life spent striving to accumulate wealth or riches. An example of someone who could be aiming at happiness through wealth would be someone, for example, as a businessman, a banker, a real estate mogul. What about the position path? The kind of life associated with the position path is one that's spent striving to obtain an esteemed position in society. So someone who's aiming at happiness through some kind of esteemed position, an example of someone who may be living that kind of life, be a doctor, school administrator, something such as that. What about the power path? The life of someone who takes power to be the key to happiness would live a life spent striving to obtain kingship or ruling position, or a position close to those who rule. So, as Lady Philosophy suggests, this might be something like a king or a queen or a close associate. Today, it may be someone, for example, such as the president of a country. What about the fame or glory path? A life that strives towards fame or glory as the path to happiness would be one spent trying to make a name for oneself in the arts of war or the arts of peace. The arts of peace would be such as an actor might be an example of someone who is pursuing the fame or glory path to happiness, a musician, and someone seeking fame or glory through the art of war might be someone high speed, such as an airborne ranger, another kind of soldier. What about the pleasure path? Well, put simply, someone following pleasure as a path to happiness is going to live a life spent seeking bodily pleasure. So examples of someone living this life may be a drunkard or someone like Hugh Hefner. What we've looked at here is the common paths through which people attempt to obtain happiness. We've talked a bit about the kinds of lives associated with each path, and I've given you some examples of the different classes of people that perhaps could be following these different paths to happiness. What I want to look at now is Lady Philosophy's evaluation of each of these paths as actually leading one to true happiness. We're going to see she's going to argue that none of them do. Let's go outside. Okay, so let us now have a look at Lady Philosophy's evaluation of each of the common paths she takes human beings to pursue in order to attain happiness. As I suggested earlier, what she's going to argue is that none of these paths wherever they lead you, it's not to true happiness. And this is going to be because where these paths can take you is to something that lacks the characteristics of true happiness, which are stated in her theory or happiness, or that set of 4 claims, right? So we can summarize the problem for each of the paths as along these lines. Given what true happiness consists in, to lead to true happiness, a path has to bring one to a state or condition in which nothing good is lacking, or in which one wants for nothing. But none of the common paths can lead to such a state. So, take again wealth. A life spent striving to accumulate wealth or riches doesn't lead to true happiness because it can be taken from you. So you'll always be worried about preserving it. That's to say, you'll lack the good of mental peace. What about the path of position or the path of status? She's going to say a life spent striving to obtain an esteemed position in society doesn't lead to true happiness either, because one can attain a high position but lack a virtuous character. High position in itself doesn't confer such a character, but it often brings out the opposite. So someone can have a high position, but they can lack the good of virtue. What about the path of power, right? So Lady Philosophy suggests that the life spent striving to obtain kingship or a ruling position or a position close to those who rule isn't a life that leads to true happiness, again, because such power can be taken away. So there will also be fear of losing it. A person in such a state would live with worry and once again lack the good of mental peace. The fame or glory path. Lady Philosophy suggests that a life spent trying to make a name for oneself in the arts of war or peace does not lead to true happiness, because there will always be people who have never heard of you. So you'll always be left wanting more. Also, fame can be lost, so you'll fear losing it and becoming irrelevant. So again, you'll lack mental peace. Lastly, the pleasure path, right? Lady Philosophy suggests that the life spent seeking bodily pleasure doesn't lead to true happiness because its pursuit is full of anxiety and its fulfillment is full of remorse. I'm guessing each of you listening to this can think of your own examples, especially how the pursuit of pleasure could be full of remorse. Some examples that students have suggested throughout the semesters when I've discussed this are hangovers, obvious one, pregnancy, disease. Also, if pleasure could lead to true happiness, Lady Philosophy says, then animals could be truly happy. Why? Because animals seem to be able to enjoy pleasure. You know, take a pig, for example, wallowing in the mud. But Boethius / Lady Philosophy takes it to be absurd that an animal could be truly happy. Lastly, you'll be thought lowly by others as being a slave to the body. And in that sense, I guess you would be lacking a good of reputation in pursuing the pleasure path. In conclusion, Lady Philosophy, after going through each of the common paths that people take to achieve happiness, she says, there is no doubt then that these roads to happiness are sidetracks and cannot bring us to the destination they promise. They may bring us somewhere. They may bring us to some kind of happiness, perhaps a low grade of happiness, but they can't bring us to what she calls true happiness, which is a full and complete happiness, lacking in nothing and leaving you with nothing else to desire. So what do you think about each of these paths? Is Lady Philosophy's evaluation of it sound? Also, might there be some other paths that people attempt to take to happiness? And if so, What are they? And what are the lives associated with these alternate paths? Some things for you to think about, and if you have any ideas on these and you want to share them, be fun to see them in the comments below. So in this video, we talked about Lady Philosophy's account of and evaluation of the common paths that human beings take to achieve happiness. We saw that in evaluating them, she suggested that none of these paths can lead to true happiness. I'm sure many of you can anticipate the kind of life or the path that Lady Philosophy is going to think can lead one to true happiness. If you thought that this would be the life dedicated to truth and goodness, that's to say God, then you're correct. But notice that establishing that such a life can lead to true happiness first requires that you establish that God exists. And accordingly, what we're going to look at in the next video is Lady Philosophy's argument for God from goodness. I'll see you in the next video. Dr. K out.